So happy summer solstice.
Yes, the strawberry moon, as they
And
call it.
well, there's that. And in Ojibwe, the word is nibim. Nibim in Ojibwe means it is summer,
I
period.
see the beauty of the indigenous languages and the very, very little bit I've ever studied them is they're so profoundly simple and direct and purposeful.
Yep. Yep.
There doesn't need to be 17 words as we do in English and French and other languages to describe a phenomenon. It is summer has a word.
That's
You
right.
don't need to say it. You don't need to say is. You don't need
No,
to say summer. You have a word for the whole phrase.
that's right. And there's don't ask me what the words are for autumn
Yeah.
or winter or whatever, but it's one
Yeah.
word. And the way it's translated into English is it is winter, it is spring, it is, and that's it. That's all
Yeah.
you need to know. And
Right.
that word applies to one day in the year.
Yeah.
Period. That's it.
Very, very simple.
Yes.
And the strawberry moon, as I was educated this morning,
Oh,
is not a red moon. It is this moon is the moon by which the strawberries are to be picked
oh,
based upon nature's timeline and
oh.
how the berries ripen. So it's called a strawberry moon because it is the moon phase that this is when you pick strawberries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That itself says something. A good point to maybe raise, and that is strawberry. Is that a particularly North American or Canadian approach to things? Because weathers and climates are so different in different parts of, say, even North America. We're talking about strawberries ripening. Is that Canadian strawberries ripening or California strawberries, or is it just, I don't know.
Oh, I think it's local to the northern climate. I
Okay.
really do because if I understand correctly, there are parts of the world where strawberries grow year round. They're a continuous plant. Berries, same as you have different citrus trees, which will mature at different times of the year depending on the
Okay.
climatic conditions between Florida and say southern Ontario.
Yeah.
Down
Yeah.
in the London area, they have some pretty significant citrus farms and citrus trees. And they'll mature at different times. I believe so. I'm not a botanist. Somebody out there could very well correct me. That'd
Yeah.
be great.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I know for this area, because I studied a lot as a bit of a segue when I was looking into the phenomenon of the 100-mile diet. I was doing it for a previous podcast episode and looking at the fact that, indigenous folks, it's been 10,000 years since the last ice age, right? 10,000 years ago, 12,000 actually, we were under a kilometer of ice here in Canada.
Yes.
So once that receded, the indigenous population lived here and ate and survived and did well based upon the food that nature provided them.
Ah.
And nature
Okay.
provides food in a sequential format
Okay.
for the animal species.
Okay.
So when you study, like, I'm a hunter and an outdoorsman. So when you study like the bear population,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when the bear emerges from the den after hibernation, nature has to provide a set of highly caloric, nutrient dense food
Okay.
because they haven't eaten and they're also nursing.
Yes. Yes.
And
Okay.
that the berries, though, only stick around for a short period of time because then nature replaces it with the next piece of food that the animal needs.
Okay.
And it's this symbiotic relationship that up until, what do we say, 400 or 500 years ago, for 100,000 years, human species ate that way as well because you ate
Right.
what nature provided. You
Yeah.
didn't, you can't have strawberries in February
Well, at that time,
at
yes.
that time, right?
Yes.
It's like you and
Yes.
I, previous discussion we had about Italians enjoying fresh tomatoes. They can only do that 1 month a year.
That's right.
The rest of the year, you can eat fresh tomatoes, even though you could actually buy tomatoes in the store.
Yes.
The point
Yeah.
is eating like that, and it's amazing when you study that how this is all sequentially laid out by nature
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
feed the animal population. And then there has to be certain foods that still can be found throughout the dead of boreal forest winter. For 7 months of the year, there's a couple of feet of snow on the ground. How does the deer and moose and everybody else stay alive?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
There's food there,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's specific food, and it's hardy food, and
yeah, yeah.
it's just really neat when you look at the integrated systems and how that works.
Well, that actually raises some very interesting questions and insights, and that is uh, a person of a certain age, even today, such as myself, would have I would not have foraged out into the boreal forest, mainly because, or boreal forest, I should say, mainly because I lived in a city. I lived in New York City. So, and I live in Toronto for whatever reason I still can't understand. But we, I grew up with seasonality around food. Um, we don't have that anymore.
Nope.
So that's a fairly radical cultural change
Yeah.
when you think about it. If we think of food as the core basis of any culture and travel around the world, that's exactly what it is. It's all about the food. Um, we know that food is seasonal, except in a culture like ours or an economy like ours, even more so.
Economy, yeah.
Yeah, even more so. So the economy drives the culture where we have access to food that is not seasonal. It's whenever it's available. That's just it. It's always available. Seasonal is whenever it's available. This is always available. You can always get uh, strawberries in January. You can always get blueberries in January, for that matter. Mind you, the price is outrageous, but that's different. That's your problem. From an economic point of view, doesn't mean you can't get it.
Nope.
We here, and this is my, again, fear, not without being afraid of repeating myself, we don't grow bananas here.
No.
But we could get bananas anytime. Right. And when you think of the process of a banana arriving from wherever it's grown to a destination in Toronto in January or in Ottawa in January, that says something about a totally different culture. In the past, closer to the earth seasons, earth cycles more than anything else, not necessarily closer to the earth, because, as I said, grew up in cities. Closer to the earth cycles, you ate what was available at any given season.
Yeah.
We no longer do that, just to repeat myself. Wonder what that says to us about what constitutes the cultural imperative of the world in which we live at this time, and how has it changed so radically?
It's also impactful for your health system as well. Your system's not your this is something that I think falls, on deaf ears for a lot of folks, is the fact that we're an animal in this animal species in the environment, and we were designed over tens of thousands of years of evolution. We've made such radical changes in the last couple hundred years as to how we exist, how we eat, how we operate, that we have not biologically evolved to catch up with the cultural
No.
changes
Yeah.
that we've made. And I think the collision, without having done any definite research into this, I think a collision, a lot of issues that we're having health wise are related to changing the rapid culture of how we consume food, how we socialize, how we gather, versus what we've done for 100,000 years that the systems are designed to support.
Okay, I think there are two things to look at, because I'm in the middle of reading a book on notes on complexity, and it's science that eludes me because I'm not a scientist, but the concepts and the ideas and the insights are fascinating.
Yeah.
The chapter I read this morning was on quantum theory, and I thought, really, Victor, like, do you think you're on an episode of Big Bang Theory? Like, I'm not. But beyond all that, there are some very interesting insights about our connectedness to the world. And biologically at a micro level, a molecular level, there's an innate connectivity that connects each of us physically to the world. We're not, we're a product of the molecular structure that is the world, and therefore we benefit from that. Yet at the same time, we are so integral to it that death is really a return to the molecular level, the atomic level, the nuclear level, whatever term you want to use, of who and what we are. We could get into, but we're not going to get into the discussion of a consciousness and what distinguishes us from other animals.
Because we know that we're here.
But because, yes, we question. That's the fundamental.
Yeah.
But beyond all that, I mean, when we think of ourselves in that term of, the ice age or the seasons for foods and so on and so forth, there are two or three things that, since the Industrial Revolution, that we more or less have radically changed things around. Industrial Revolution, gave us a sense that everything could be mechanized. And in mechanizing, even the analogy of what is a body is a machine, which misses the point that the body is not a machine. The body is a molecular structure that is not mechanical. So we, even in the early stages, and even currently now with the IT, the brain is a computer. No, it's not. The brain actually can do things that computers can't. And even the push for AI is something where we say, well, is it going to replace the human in terms of decision making? Our human capacity is always going to be there. Even if we were to say, because we're obnoxious sons of bitches, more than anything else. And I firmly believe that is the reason why we're going to survive, because we're too obnoxious not
Yeah,
to.
absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Yet we have this analogous thinking that is mechanistic. And part of the mechanism is, well, we can grow bananas anytime, anywhere, and import them anytime, anywhere, and therefore eat them anytime, anywhere, without acknowledging that that's a special mechanized approach to food. We're not even talking about additives, which is the whole other reason why, we kill ourselves in the food that we eat. It's really the fact that, bananas are manufactured.
Yeah, they are. Absolutely.
They're not just grown.
No.
And you go, whoa, wait a minute. Strawberries that you get in January in a cold climate like Canada, they come from a hothouse. What is a hothouse? A hothouse is a manufacturing process. All of I'd say most of our fruit, if not all, unless you go back to the land, is manufactured.
Yeah.
Right?
There's an industrial component to it.
Yes.
I remember growing up in the East Coast, blueberries being the number one thing.
Yes.
And we used to go out in the blueberry fields.
Yep.
With our 5-gallon buckets along the side of the highways. You'd always see cars pull over the side of the highways of blueberry season. People out there in their waders, and they're filling up their buckets of blueberries because we get fresh, real, actual, non-pesticide covered produce that was safe to eat. And when we have found an apple that had a wormhole in it, that was actually a positive sign because that apple had not been doused with pesticides.
Hmm.
So when the worm ate through one side and out the other, or if it was still in there, you got yourself a little extra protein, but you knew that it wasn't going to be covered in other things. But what one question that I always I like to ask people is like, just because we can do something, should we?
Yes.
The question of the bananas is fantastic. I can import food from anywhere in the world,
That's right.
but should I? Because it's not required. How, without getting into racial discussions, humans have evolved around the world based upon their environmental exposure.
Hmm.
The physical size, the color of their skin, the
Right.
characteristics of their body have all been based upon where they have lived traditionally on this earth and the environmental considerations. That's why the human species is one species, but we have a whole bunch of different races as part of the species. But that's because of environment. Now that changed when true globalism and world travel kicked off, in the 1400s, 1500s, and sailing started. But we don't evolve at that pace. We've culturally rapidly changed the world. So
Yes.
people who are in sunbelt areas, but whose origins are not from sunbelt areas, are wondering why they're all getting burned. There's a whole natural component in there, and we grew up in an area of the world that didn't require bananas for nutrients.
Yes.
Like it's for me, it's economically speaking, a banana is a luxury good.
Yes.
It's not a
Yes.
necessity, right?
Yes. Yes.
Everything and this is when I go back
Yeah.
to what I said about the 100-mile diet.
Yeah.
Every piece of nutrient that I need to be a healthy human being in his 50s is available from nature within 100 miles of where I live here
Yes.
in Ontario.
Yes. Yes.
Everything else
Yeah.
is a luxury
Yeah.
good. I have no requirement for mangoes, avocados. Don't get me started on what avocados are doing to the environment and crime and the crime syndicates involved in the avocado trade. That's a whole nother podcast. But all of that is a luxury good that I question, should we just because we can?
Yes. Yes. Interestingly enough, by the way, just as an aside, about the 100 kilometers or 100 miles, you read literature, especially coming out of the industrial age, out of England, so Victorian, if you wish, Victorian, Edwardian Victorian. And you get Charles Dickens, and you get the sense of something that's missing. I remember reading about, you received an orange at Christmas as a gift, as a young person.
Yeah.
The whole history of stockings hanging at the fireplace was for those special things that would be so unique.
Yeah.
At the season, oranges being one of the more unique things, obviously not grown in England, but it would be in the stocking, and that would be the special treat at Christmas time. Now, special treats at Christmas time that I get from my family are new toothbrush every year, but that's different. Okay, that's a whole other.
It's
That's a
funny
whole other
when we
symbol.
age, things are all different what we
Oh
look
yes,
for.
we don't get oranges anymore.
Nope.
But when the kids were younger, it used to be oranges, which was fascinating in itself. But what's interesting around all this, since we're talking about things that affect our current economics-driven culture, and it's economics-driven culture, the other side of which is consumerism. Aiding and abetting all that is globalization and supply chain logistics.
Yep.
The sophistication around, what we call supply chain logistics as an art and a science, if you want to use that analogy, is that it allows us to have access to things from anywhere in the world at any given time.
Yep.
And so the cases sometimes that we use in some of our programs is the main one is Zara. I mean, to me, it's going to be one of the most fascinating companies I've ever looked at in terms of case. You know, to have this cube, which is their center of operation in some small town in Galicia in Spain that nobody can even spell, and to be a worldwide dominant, you know, clothing manufacturer, where you don't just feed the economy, you don't just feed consumerism, you create consumerism.
You create the demand out
You
of thin air.
create the demand. You know, most companies are happy with their supply chain and logistics to manage demand.
Yeah.
Zara creates demand. And the creating of demand is every 2 weeks there's something new out on the hanger, and you go, that is absolutely phenomenal, completely outrageous when you think about it. And when we think about it and we extend that idea to food, it's the same thing. It took longer to get there because Zara is, you know, so much on top of things, but it took longer for us to get there. But we live in economically driven consumerist cultures that say I can go down to the local store and buy whatever I want. Now, those who intentionally choose that 100-mile, 100-kilometer diet, that's one thing. But most of us don't. Most of us just go to the store and say, oh, okay, I need this, this, and this, you know, and I'm cooking tonight and I want this, this, and this. That's it, period, full stop. You know, you go to the cheese emporium that I often enough go to, and you have cheese from around the world. And even more interesting, they used to bring cheese in at Christmas time from Spain, very specialized cheese, sheep's cheese. Now you can get it anytime.
Yep.
It was only at Christmas.
Yep.
And that was the treat, because I would bring that cheese to the family dinner at Christmas. And now I can bring it, you know, in the middle of the summer.
And it's altering our cultural assumptions of food as well, from the perspective of there's a demand for strawberries in February, and then there's an argument that is provided and supported that somehow strawberries are too expensive in February, and how can I healthily feed my family if I can't afford the fresh fruit in February?
Yes.
When the human diet does not require fresh fruit in February, because that's not how the nature, or religiously, however you want to look at it, that's not how we are designed to consume food. When we would go handpick flats of strawberries every year. I was raised by a single mother. I had a brother and sister, three of us, and we would have these 4 big flats, and each one of them would have 16 quarts in it. And we would have to handpick that in the bright sun every year. But we picked strawberries on one day a year when they were in season. And then my mother produced jars of freezer jam and everything else. So that's how we had fresh fruit. This demand for, I want access to what I believe is the best possible food 12 months a year. And then it's supported by and backed up by a lot of political ideology that this should be cheap, that this should be reduced in price, and that the entire cost of supply chain logistics should just be eaten magically somewhere along the line, and I should get it. And, you know, we've long said that when I've studied the food industry, that when you look at it, your frozen berries are that's in your frozen food aisle are far fresher and better for you than what they call fresh in February. They're flash frozen within a couple of hours of being picked. They're probably better, other than the few weeks a year that you truly get fresh berries. The best berries you can buy are frozen berries. But that's culturally not what we're telling people. We're telling people that the produce section of their grocery store is where your fresh food is found. The most nutritionally dense food is found there. And that is indeed highly incorrect. But that is what we culturally tell people. So the follow on to that cultural change is Now we have these supply chain systems. Now we have calls
Right.
for price controls and
Yep.
government intervention into the
Yep.
food
Yep.
industry.
Yep.
All of this because people were changing the culture
Yep.
faster than the
Yep.
system changes. And we don't pause to think whether we should be doing that. You can have blueberries year round, right? That's not a problem. You just buy them all in March and
And
April
freeze.
and freeze them.
Yeah.
You buy a 5-gallon two 5-gallon buckets of blueberries in April
Yep.
and you freeze them. And now you have blueberries year round. But that's people want that ready access, walk down the street to the cheese
Yep.
emporium to grab what I want right
That's
now,
right.
today,
Yep.
and go home.
And also the way we, not only the way we eat, but also the way we prepare food, cook. For example, I grew up, when I was growing up, my mother would never use fresh tomatoes to make tomato sauce for spaghetti or pasta. And you go, Italians, don't they use? Actually, they don't. Italians use canned and very special cans.
Yeah.
So you get them. They're relatively expensive, but Italians use the canned tomatoes because those are the ones that have been canned immediately at their ripe moment. And every Italian nonna knows that's the best tomato to make tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not the stuff you get sitting out there looking red and round, on the counter. You use that, and you're very selective. You use that to make salad, to put it in a sandwich.
Yeah.
But you don't cook with it.
No.
Right? Because it's not the best tomato. It's what my mother used to call the eating tomato versus the cooking tomato.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't hear that anymore. You don't get people talking in that way anymore. Because you're right, we are, I don't want to use the word driven. We have assumptions and expectations. And the assumptions and expectations are fresh means this.
Yeah.
And fresh means this because I could go and pick it up and squeeze it, smell it, whatever. So my senses can now interact with the apple or the tomato or the blueberries or well, you can't with blueberries because they come in plastic. But beyond all that, we look at it. You take the plastic where the blueberries are and you look at it upside down and sideways just to see if there's something that's slightly damaged. So you won't buy the slightly damaged.
Yeah.
That is what drives the purchasing. And what drives the availability or accessibility is global supply chains. All right. What's not understood and not known, and we don't actually care about it, is, how does it get there? And who is involved at ground zero to get it there? During one of our sessions, one of the participants he finished his PhD on well, part of it was on ancient cacao, cocoa beans that goes into making chocolate. And he went out of his way to go to the local places in, in Brazil and in Chile and Peru and so on and so forth, as well as then went to Africa to see, well, where do cocoa beans come from? And there is the agribusiness cocoa bean that goes into what is candy, not chocolate. And then there is the ancient. And the ancient in South America actually goes back to the Aztecs. And it's part of the food culture of the indigenous peoples that combined seasonality, religious belief, medicinal connection. You didn't drink coffee or cacao, if you will, because it was a candy. You drank it because it was a medicine, or
Yeah.
it was nutritious, or it had this impact or that impact. Uh, we have gotten to the point of saying, well, we're not really interested in that stuff. We want to know, can I buy my Mars bar? And can I do it for less than $1.99?
We've lost our relationship with food.
Yes,
We used to have a
yes,
key relationship with
yep,
food, and food was a spectrum. Food was a process. You
yep,
had to find the food, you had to harvest the food, you had to prepare the food, you had to store the food.
yes,
If you think about now, um, if you go and you access a large animal, trying to be politically correct here, and you need to process the large animal um, for food storage, um, without mechanical devices, we've lost the skill set
yep,
to be able to harvest a large animal from
yes,
nature
yes,
and smoke and preserve
yes,
1,000 pounds of meat
yep,
over a period of several days. Like
yes,
we just look at there's my T-bone ribeye steak. That's really
yep,
cool. I'm going to grab that sucker and it's going to be wonderful and delicious.
yes,
And probably for a good, most people don't understand the abattoir process in Canada,
yes,
but
yes,
it's we've lost that relationship with the effort, and it goes back to the old adage about water. Nobody understands the value of water until you have to carry it.
yes, yes,
We just have these assumptions about the availability of food, the availability of potable water, the availability of other things, and we've lost that sense of responsibility for being able to find it. And I teach the self-reliant part about it of
yes,
saying, you know, I like I follow a 100-mile diet, 160-kilometer diet, but I really enjoy things that come from afar,
yeah,
right? I love my coffee. I like a banana every once in a while. I don't mind an avocado, but none of them are necessary.
no.
Absolutely none of them are necessary. And part of my regular, well, the coffee is, but
I was just going to say,
that's a whole different coffee.
let's be careful here.
Yeah, yeah, coffee. All right. But in reality, I don't need it. Like I just got back yesterday from the butcher and I got a $300 meat order, a bunch of frozen steaks from a local company here, and it's all cows from the valley,
Yep,
grass-fed, grass-finished cows from the
yep,
valley.
yep, yep,
So the entire system, including the farmer who raised the cattle, the facility that processed the cattle,
yep,
and the vendor who sends it to me, are
yep,
all in that very tight supply chain.
yep, yep.
Very local, very tight.
But let's also look at this in terms of the supply chain. All right, you just put in an order for $300 worth of meat, beef,
Yep.
like local, whatever as you described it. I do not think now. If you think about everything you have to do in order to maintain that supply,
Yep.
you become the logistics company. You need to put it somewhere. I'm sure it's going to be a freezer or refrigerator. All
Yep.
right, that's your warehouse right there. All right, you need to get it to the house, whether it's delivered or whether you go pick it up. But somewhere along the line, you have to deal with transport. Right. The cooking of it is actually secondary to the movement of, all right, so somebody had to slaughter, process, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everything from supply all the way to in your freezer, right? That's all your supply chain.
Yep.
And you are the supply chain.
Yep.
Now, think of people who live in apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my nephew and his wife, they live in an apartment that's one bedroom. They have a freezer, right? She's Mexican. She has to make sure that they have a supply of meat. period, full stop.
Yeah.
So going to the butcher to get it, not going to the grocery store and have a cellophane pack of something.
No, no, no,
Right?
no,
No,
no.
that's a whole other thing. So they have accommodated, but I think about people who live in small spaces and what is it that they cannot do? All right. Well, they can't have large freezers in order to store, so they don't have a warehouse
Yeah.
or a distribution center if we want to use that more um, uh, logistics term. So even if we were to say the food culture were to revolve around the immediacy of food, it just can't be done given the way we live. All right.
Well, it can, and I'll counter with how I used to get my vegetables. I get my vegetables, or I used to for a couple of years, as part of a community sourced supported agriculture. So I gave the farmer $500 in January, and I would get 13 weeks of boxes starting in July and running through until the beginning of September or the beginning of October. And we would share in the risk. So I'd pay for it in January and I wouldn't get fed for 6 months. But if it was a bumper harvest, I would get bumper boxes every week of fresh fruit. There is community supported agriculture here in Ottawa that also has a greenhouse. That's the word. So they actually run that program with a reduced number of plants available, of species available year round. So 52 weeks a year, you can sign up to get a box of fresh vegetables once a week. And if you want to add on to it, a carton of farm fresh eggs. So this system is designed for farmers in the local area, so farmers north of Toronto, to feed people in apartments in Toronto, right? Because they can't store a year's worth of food, so they can't do a fall harvest and process 1,000 jars of canned food and put them up on the shelf in their apartment.
No.
But the systems do exist for them to get access to weekly boxes of fresh food, like actually freshly cut and grown. And what I loved about it is the farm that I used is 30 kilometers from my home. So just on the outskirts of Ottawa. The person picks it, the person sorts it, and the person delivers it to me. There's literally 3 humans who touch that food before it gets to me, and its entire driving distance is no more than 30 kilometers.
Yeah, you just described what would be a supply chain.
Right. So those are available to people who live in high density housing.
Yes. Oh, I'm not saying they're not. That's not the point. But it does raise some very interesting questions around the culture of urban living, right? Where anonymity is a core to the culture. That is the key value. And we live in a society where ennui is the basic approach to things. We will not, we generally, we generally will not find out about things like that. We live in isolation. I go back to, what are some of the root causes of the way in which, we live? The ways in which we live are based on exclusivity, anonymity. I don't want to even know my neighbors. I'm not interested. I live in, a 30-story high-rise with, about 1,000 other people. I don't even know. I just want to know that I can do laundry, hopefully in my own unit, and that the elevator is going to work when I need to get out of here, and I can park my car. Everything else. And I'm thinking more of not just young people, even older people who can't do things like that. I'm thinking of some of my neighbors who are older. They have children who help them, obviously, but there are those who will use the e-delivery service from, say, the grocery stores.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not about the farm. I'm actually going to be super blunt. People do not think of food as coming from the ground.
No, not at all. Nope.
I mean, we're talking pure psychological. You know, where do you get your chicken? You get your chicken in the chicken aisle of the local grocery store, and that chicken is going to be wrapped in cellophane. You know, that chicken does not have feathers. I don't have to deal with the guts. You know, it's there. It is. You know, when I talk to my friends who are of an older generation and who, for example, um, there's this joke among us of us older types where we love to make chicken soup. Whether you're Jewish or Italian or whatever, chicken soup is chicken soup.
Yep.
They have expressed astonishment that the next generation, especially the spouses of, say, their children, don't know how to make chicken soup. And you know, you talk to, you know, my friend, you get the bones, you get the fatty whatever, you get this, you get this, you get this, you get the necks that nobody wants to touch, you know.
And the
Yes,
giblets.
you
Yep.
get giblets, and you just go, they wouldn't go near it to make chicken soup. And it's not that they're stupid, it's just a case of it's not part of what they would think about.
No. And again, it's part, I think, of to me, the unfortunate sense of urgency that we've adopted in our lives is that I want everything done now because there are other things that I would rather be doing.
There you go. And that's part of the culture. Yes.
I don't want to cook for
No.
3 hours
No.
to prepare supper.
No.
I want to throw something in the oven for 15 minutes or
Yep.
nuke something for 5 in the microwave.
Yep.
Slam some food downrange because I've got something else. And that's a cultural evolution that whole nother podcast we could talk about cultural
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
generational roles, but we've moved away from a relationship with food that includes the entire process of finding it, searching it, harvesting it. You look at the old school, and I'm sure you're familiar with these videos being Italian, of an old Italian lady looking at everything and
Oh,
inspecting
touching.
everything
Yes.
and touching and making sure this is
Yes.
the best
Yes.
that's available and they know
Yes.
exactly what they're looking for.
Yep.
Nowadays, it's, and I say this a total sidebar, it's the same as home insurance. When you have to get fire insurance, what do? You go to the lowest bidder, sign the paperwork, and run away, and you have no idea what you have.
No.
Right? And we
No.
do the same thing with the food system. We look at what is the cheapest piece of food. And now we move this discussion 20 years later and why our population is so unhealthy.
Yes. Yes. You know, interesting you say that. Among other things, not only is there, okay, I've run into too many people like this, and then not just young people. There's no love of food. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a love of food. You know, and on top of it, I like to cook. It's the way in which and there's a science to that. And I'm not a science person. I don't use cookbooks or anything. It's the old-fashioned way of mixing ingredients, and in trying to think about what it would taste like if you use this much salt or that much, you know, paprika or that much, you know, oregano or whatever. And you're thinking about taste. So you're connecting your tongue to your eyes, to your nose, to your brain. And to me, that's the fun of it, is to do that somewhat holistically. But one of the things that I have learned, because this is my steady diet, and I always do fresh, not from the farm, I can't do that. I don't have time. I have all the reasons. I
All
don't.
the excuses.
Well, reasons, excuses. I don't care what you call them. That's reality. You know, when you work 7 days a week because you're stupid, you know, you have to give up something. But what I find fascinating is I don't think people necessarily are driven by cheapest. I think they're driven by whatever's the most convenient.
Yeah.
We live in a world of society, more than the world at large, of convenience.
Oh
What's
yeah.
the most convenient thing that I can do? I've just come back from work or just come home from work. I don't have time. I'm too tired, and I want to watch the game. All right. Now, one of the things that I have done is to change because of my diet. I have changed my ability. Actually, I've eliminated my ability to eat food that's processed.
Yep.
I it's I can't digest it.
Oh,
It just there it is. We just finished a leadership program, and we had pizzas on several days. And the first day that we had pizza, I was violently ill. Well, that was on Monday, and I had to
yeah.
teach, Thursday, right through to Friday. And I'm going,
Yeah.
oh, how am I going to get through the day? Well, give me a stick of pepperoni and watch me die.
Yep.
It's not because pepperoni is not necessarily good. It's where does the pepperoni come from? Who created the pepperoni? What is in there
Yep.
in terms of preservatives? It's the preservatives that kill me. And it's known that the difference between French fries in Europe, McDonald's French fries in Europe, McDonald's French fries here in North America is massive because the McDonald's French fries here are coated with chemicals in order to keep them so-called fresh longer, whereas in Europe it's not allowed. They
A
can't.
lot of that food is not allowed.
Well, they can do French fries, but they can't add the additives. You
And
know,
I don't know if you've ever heard of Chris Van Tulleken. So he is a gentleman from the UK. I was just looking up his book there called Ultra Processed People.
yes,
And it's about the very much fact of that, of the ideas behind the ultra processed food. And so in my work, when I talk to people about taking control of your life and grabbing control, and a bit of mentoring that I do on that, is the first thing I say is eat food. Um, just food, like
yeah,
single ingredient food. Like
yeah,
food does not have multiple ingredients. My shtick that I say all the time is if it has more than one ingredient, it is a manufactured good that
yes,
may be reasonably digestible by the human animal, but
yes,
it is no longer food.
yes,
So eat whatever the heck you want, whatever you prefer, pescatarian, vegetarian, carnivore, herbivore, I don't care. Just eat food. Like for me, my second favorite, actually my favorite food in the face of this earth is bread.
oh yeah, yeah.
Bread and I don't agree. So I
Oh,
finally broke down, did some research, and got some flour imported from Italy.
there you go.
The double knot flour
Yeah,
that is European flour, because
yeah,
the breads that are in the grocery stores in North America would be illegal in Europe because of
yeah,
the contents
yeah,
of
yeah.
them.
Oh yeah,
It wouldn't be
totally,
sold.
totally.
So the research told me that what I did, that Italian and French flour
Yes,
contains far less gluten,
yes,
because it answers the question, why can Italian and French people eat so much bread and pasta and not be 300 pounds? Other
that's
than the
right.
fact that they walk 15,000 steps uphill
Yeah,
every
there you
day.
go. That's different.
Um, but how is it? So I'm trying to figure out a way to eat my favorite food
Yeah,
without it. But,
yeah,
and it's working fine. And I bake the bread myself from scratch. But the point is that the number one thing that we need to do is, that I always recommend to people, is just eat food. Like, I love fishing. There is nothing better than what I call a shore lunch. That's when you catch the
yeah,
fish,
yeah,
you haul it out, you process it, and you cook it right there on the shore of the
yeah,
river.
yeah,
You will never have a better piece of fish in your life.
yeah,
It's fish. It's like real food.
yeah.
Give me a can of tuna,
No,
and I don't consider that food.
no,
Give
no.
me a tin of, or a frozen fish fillet from Highliner. Sorry, Highliner, don't sue me. I won't. That's not fish to me.
No,
That's not fish. I
no.
grew up in the East Coast. I work for a couple of years in the fish processing industry
Yep.
before I went off and chased my dreams and joined the army. Um, Real fish is real fish.
Yep.
Real meat is real meat. If
Yep.
you're a vegetarian, I think that's fantastic.
Yep. Yep.
Eat vegetables in season. And when you
Yes.
do that,
Yep.
you see everybody that I've spoken to has had a significant change. And this guy, his book, and he's got some great videos and podcast episodes talking about it's the ultra processed food. It's why when we say, if you want to lose weight, just eat less and move more.
No.
But he's like, you don't understand the ultra
No.
processed chemicals
Yes.
uh,
No.
act as addictive capacities.
Exactly.
There are chemicals that are allowed in food in North America that have addictive nature that are banned in the European Union.
Yep.
And they're put into food in North America because they are zero or low calorie, but they block sensory uptake in your brain. So it's an intentional move by the food industry to block your ability to sense being full
Yes.
so that you will eat more of their food
Yes.
and you will become addicted to that food. It's
Yes.
very much like he often refers to it as processed food is the smoking of the 1970s.
Yes.
It's going to take us 2 to 3 more decades before we realize we have to ban processed food. Just like we're banning smoking, we have to take processed food out of the human diet. So it's a pretty good argument. He's one guy, but he's pretty impactful.
Let me put it to you this way. Not being the positivist that you are, that we're all going to change, and in another decade or so, we're all going to, get rid of processed food. That ain't going to happen. Besides, I'm not going to be around for a decade or two anyway. So
Very well.
But at the same time, again, I get back to my recurring theme that in an industrialized world that is fraught with consumerism being ease of access,
Yep.
supported by strong global supply chains, none of this is going to go away.
No.
Now, for supply chain and logistics people to discuss this in this way that pinpoints the fact that global supply chains as a core business is actually aiding and abetting the consumerist cultures that we live in.
Yep.
But it is reality. I can't see anybody not seeing that. I go back to Zara. You don't actually think that Zara creating demand, controlling that demand, does not depend on supply chain logistics. That they make the clothes in Galicia, in nowhere Spain. I love Spain. I shouldn't have said that. But at the same time, if they didn't have a strong supply chain, which is not horizontally or vertically controlled by them,
no,
they don't own it, but they definitely use it, and at a fairly significant cost, because everything is moved by plane, air cargo, because their cargo isn't significant enough, and they don't want to deal with the ship anyway. It is a cultural business decision that then is supported by, it's probably a better term, by logistics strategy that then aids and abets the consumerism. And for a group like fast fashion, now to put Zara into a fast fashion mode, which is not always accurate, they're not only fast fashion, that has environmental impact. Now, if we take that to the food world, that has human impact. It's an environmental impact that has a direct impact on us and our bodies.
Yeah. And I think there's and this is something that I've been thinking about on the supply chain side is, are we better off with the Amazon model? Now, supply chain right now has got a retail element to it that has a physical presence. Are we better off for both the logistics perspective, freshness, less waste, less TX, environmental footprint perspective, less climate impacting emissions, et cetera, if we move to the Amazon model of direct to consumer? So Zara still produces the way they do, but Zara ships to you. So there's the online purchasing of clothing and the in-store purchasing of clothing.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done it, and I don't know if anybody's seen it, but I would love to understand if anybody's ever done a study on the different types of impacts of both those chains in a comparison. Which one has a greater or lesser environmental impact? Because does it make sense to take the grocery store out of the food industry and put people back in direct relationship with the food store? Right? You remember there was a butcher,
Mm-hmm.
there was a seafood place,
Yes.
there was a cheese store. And
Yes.
in certain parts of cities, you can find that again. What's that individual you're talking about in the building that has the e-delivery of groceries?
Yes.
What if the grocery store was no longer a place you went, just like you don't go shopping in an Amazon warehouse,
No.
but the warehouse element of the logistics still is there?
Yes.
And it's still done because you can't ship directly from Spain to each
No.
household. And
No.
that we understand that portion still.
Right.
But if that last mile logistics becomes direct to consumer and retail is not available, do we lessen the footprint, improve the service? And are people better off if we do that?
Well, I think that's a pretty open question because there are all kinds of, it gets back to that issue of complexity. We're all so complexly related in so many ways that you have a solution on the one hand, potentially will create difficulties on the other hand. Um, One of the issues I think that an e-purchasing capability, whether it's groceries or just regular retails, well, some of it, you're not going to get rid of all retail, especially if you're doing a Canadian Tire or a Home Depot and stuff
Oh,
like
no.
that. So let's just say clothing, consumer goods like clothing and so on and so forth, and then food. All right. What is the potential impact? And this is a question, I'm not asking you to answer it. I'm just getting us to think about it. What is the potential impact of multiple deliveries in the last 50 kilometers in an urban setting where 5 people or 10 people or even 20 people in my building, never mind the bigger buildings around me, all order food at different times? All right. Now we're having multiple deliveries coming to the same location, coming out of probably the same store or distribution center. Now we have not eliminated the long-term global supply line because those things still have to get into that distribution center. We have potentially eliminated the purchasing capability in that there's no bricks and mortar. Now it's online. But at the same time, there still has to be a delivery. Whether I go to the store with my trundle buggy and drag my stuff back to home. I use that term trundle buggy. It was my mother's favorite. Or I get into a car to go to the local store. Somewhere along the line, someone's going to have to deliver that to my home if I do it online. But that's one side. Have we then also exacerbated the problem of even more eliminating the seasonality of food? Because now it's not even food that I pick up and smell and touch and whatever. It's a picture.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I'm buying a picture of a
You
tomato.
are. And people want to go see their produce. People want to check
I
out
do.
produce, right?
I mean, it's bad enough. I'm having a hard time with produce now that is all packaged in cellophane. I mean, how much plastic do we need? You know, when you buy two zucchini and you look at them, you know they're fine. And why are they vacuum packed in plastic? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
It's a actually I do know. It's a logistics. It's how
Oh
they
yeah.
package
It's a
it in order
shipping
to
issue.
move
Yeah,
it. Sure, sure. It's a transport issue. It's a warehousing issue. It's not a food issue. It has nothing to do. It's not making it any fresher.
yeah. No.
It's a case, but then I have to deal with the plastic. So if we were to go to a, let's say, a larger Amazon approach to things in terms of food, our culture will have gone the next level of disconnect from the actual food.
Yep. Yeah. It's another way of distributing that may have a lesser impact. That's part of my argument. Like I advocate for and say, and not advocate for. I openly present an option of where the standard Canadian family can remove the grocery store from the food supply chain and still get access to fresh food, the food that nutritious food that they need for their family. The grocery stores are not necessary to do that. They are a convenience and
Yes,
they're easy and they're
yes,
simple because
yes.
everything's in the same place. But I argue that they're not necessary.
Mm.
And in fact, and I'll use steaks for example because I love beef. The the price I pay for a ribeye froze and I pick it up frozen. I can get it delivered to my house for $25 a box. So it doesn't matter how much I offer, $25 a box. But I go pick it up. I pay $15 for a 10-ounce ribeye steak, and it's beautiful.
Mhm.
You buy a 10-ounce ribeye steak in the grocery store, and it's 28. So I almost get a 50% discount
Mhm.
on my meat by not going to the grocery store.
Okay.
Again, it's like you said, it's culturally, people aren't going to actively search for these options, et cetera. And it's part of that. These options to get fresher, more nutritious food is out there. But a completely other cultural thing that I don't, and I think this is really huge in logistics world. Um, Somebody and I this morning were talking about cars and how the pandemic shortage and struggles in the supply chain of delivery and maintaining
Mhm.
demonstrated an opportunity. And I've seen the head of Ford talk about this a couple of times about wanting to turn the car industry into a showroom. Like there's no cars on the lot. You can't buy a car on the lot. You go to the showroom, the models are there, and you take one for a test drive, you like it, and you order. And your
Yes,
bespoke vehicle is delivered
yes,
6 to 8 weeks later,
yep,
literally to your front door,
yes,
right? It's delivered directly to you. And I was reading something online about somewhere between 3 and 5% of Toyota's cars are purchased online. Totally. They don't need a dealer. The dealer's just there to receive the vehicle, etc. That the person will go online to toyota.ca and will buy the car.
okay,
Um, and this is something that car companies and the head of Ford would like to do. They said because there's a huge price increase involved in using the dealer network because Ford doesn't own the dealers. So
no,
Ford sells cars to the dealer.
that's
They
right,
sell cars to you.
that's right,
The dealer then sells it to you. If
yes,
Ford, in some very much like the Tesla model, Tesla has places where you can go sit in their cars, but they don't have car lots that you buy. You have to order online, you have to pay online, and then it gets delivered literally to your driveway. Um, and there's options like that that could improve the impact. Now, we could argue whether Ford would reduce their prices because of this new savings that they had, or whether they would just want to grab the piece of the profit margin that the dealers got and keep it for themselves. I think we could probably figure out the answer to that. But the point is this is a culture. It's culturally ingrained in us that we go to the car lot and we look for a car that's available on the lot and make a deal on the spot and come back a day later and drive away in our car. You can't do with food. You need that. You need it regularly. You can't wait 6 weeks for your food.
Oh, no.
But what if you negotiated your food 6 weeks ahead of time? What if I said to you, you need to sit down and pay for a vegetable delivery service that won't start for 6 months, but you're going to get a year's worth of vegetables every week,
Yeah.
fresh from the farm?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How many people would think that far ahead?
Yeah.
I don't think many, to be honest with you, because we don't discuss these type of culturally challenging ideas.
I'd like to pick up on your steaks issue, the difference between $50 and $30.
Yep.
Okay. One of the things that we try to look at in some of our programs and some of our research is value creation. What constitutes value creation? And from multiple points of view. Often enough, value creation is looked at from the point of view of the company. What are we doing to put value into the products and so on and so forth. So, and we use John Mariotti's The Shapeshifters, is the book that he gives us 5 dimensions on what constitutes value, one of which is the cost factor. And the cost factor is from a customer's point of view, is really not about the price. It's about accessibility, right? And the way he defines it or describes it is, and I find this fascinating, is what did the customer have to do in order to buy the item that we're talking about? Now, using your example of $15 for steaks. Now, what Mariotti is saying, it isn't the $15. It's what did you have to do in order to go to the location, in order to buy the steaks, in order to have them delivered home.
Yep.
Now, just let me finish. Part of it is you go directly to the source, or at least as close to the source as possible, the butcher and so on and so forth. You could do this, by having it sent to you X amount of steak over X amount of time on a regular basis, what you do with your vegetables. That's perfectly legitimate. But there's a cost involved beyond just the $15 or whatever the cost of the financial transaction is. I mean, it's about your time, your accessibility, your drive, the use of gas, whatever, you name it, right? Plus, if you get frozen steaks and you get them on a regular basis, you have to have your own warehouse, i.e. freezer. All of that has costs involved. There's no such thing as just, well, I have a freezer, I got to fill it anyway. Well, yeah, but there's electrical bills, there's this, there's that, this, Yep. If you think of the total experience, right, it isn't just $15. It's more than $15. Now, having said that, while both of us could say, and I do say, $28 for the same damn steak is kind of exorbitant. Like, come on, that's double. But when we think about the accessibility, the convenience, and so on and so forth, that is borne by the store where we go to buy it, then we're saying, without doing the analysis, saying it's exactly the same price. Yours is probably, even if you add in all of those other costs, in terms of accessibility, it's probably, it will probably be less than the $28, because even with, say, the profit margin being added to it, all right, your process, or your approach, your logistics behind your steak is going to be less than $28. All right. However, it isn't going to be $15. There's going to be more
Yep.
involved. Now, if I go to the local store and I buy a steak for $28, I'm also spending time, effort, cost to go to the local store. So I'm now adding to the $28. So if the base price is 28 and I need to do all these other things, we're already out of the ballpark in comparison with the 15. Even if we were to take your 15 and add all the other costs involved in terms of you and what you have to do, it won't go anywhere near. It can't come anywhere near the $28. All right. So what am I paying for? I'm paying for the convenience of not looking for a butcher in a large city that's going to give me steak, where I can buy steak. Now, there are several butchers that I like and I have purchased on e-commerce.
Yep. Yeah.
And I do it seasonal. All right. I do it because there are certain foods I want to eat at certain times in order to do certain celebrations. All right. I wish I could contact my friends in Alberta who have a cattle ranch, grass-fed cattle. There they are. They send it to the slaughterhouse. There it is. And I wish I could make a deal. And I'm sure I can as soon as I go out there again, out to Calgary. I'm sure I can make a deal where they could ship it to me.
Yep.
No different from what you can do. So yes, there are options. There are ways of say getting around the bricks and mortar of the local grocery store and do it both more in a more healthy way and potentially a more environmentally positive way, and at the same time a more financially positive way.
Yep.
Right. But then we get to the urban life.
Okay. Oh yeah, I know.
It's driven by convenience.
It is.
I would suspect, and if I ever did a study of this, if we ever did a study of a population like even Ottawa, they probably do not know that there are actual butchers available where they can get meat that's straight out of the farm.
Yep. And this is the awareness that I think I always counter it, because I counter online when people are consistently saying, and it's true, that due to inflation, due to economic conditions, grocery prices are higher. What I find quite interesting is people are not looking for a solution to that.
No.
They're not looking to change their behavior to save them money.
No.
They simply want somebody to suppress the prices that they're facing.
Yes.
Right? They're not willing. If somebody says, I have this problem, I go to my local favorite grocery store and it's too expensive, please reduce the prices in my local grocery store, or give me magical government money to help me with that.
Yes.
Nobody, or very few, are actually interested in saying, hey, how do I change my purchasing behavior so that I get better food at a cheaper price, but I have to do things differently than I do now?
Yes.
But it's behavioral adoption that is really hard, really hard to do.
We're talking about a society. I'll just be generic about it. A society, not a nation, but a society where convenience is a critical value.
Yep.
Critical. It isn't. It isn't just an oh, by the way. No. It's a critical value.
Yep.
All right. I need to be convenienced. If you inconvenience me, then it leads to number 2, whining.
Yep.
We're a culture of whiners. What do you mean it's going to cost me? What do you mean I have to do it this way? What do you mean? And we could play the so-called quotations, sophisticated approach, which is say, I have my freedoms, why are you impinging on my freedom? Well, your freedom, and I always say this, freedom is always in context. Freedom is not an absolute. Freedom is not you can do anything you want. Freedom is living up to your responsibilities. That's what freedom is. All right. We can get into it. That's a different podcast.
I think we need to save, because that sounds like a great discussion of what freedom and liberty is.
Yes.
And I think coming up on the Canada Day and
Yes.
July 4th, I think that would be a great frame
Yes.
for our next podcast to talk about what freedom and liberty means.
Yes.
From an American and Canadian perspective. I just throw that in there that I think that would be.
And yes, so I think we've been a little far-reaching, and right now in our discussion, some of it has been pretty critical of our social need for comfort, which is fine. It's nice, and by the way, I to be self-critical, it's nice to be able to critique the world out there in the comfort of my rather luxurious home, where I have comfort coming out of my eyeballs, and a store just up the street.
But you also happen to have worked for 60 plus years to earn that.
Yes, but just because you have worked for X number of years to get to a status, if you want to use that term, to be able to live this kind of life. Let's put it that way. Not luxurious necessarily, maybe that's the wrong word I used. But this kind of life does not justify that you can do anything you damn well please. Gets us back to freedom versus liberty. Okay. As a matter of fact, this is the problem I think many of us have with people who are that 1%, who may or may not. There's nothing wrong with being among the 1%. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with being super rich. There's nothing. I am not some kind of socialist, bomb thrower. Give me a break. But at the same time, how do we, whatever percent we're in, live responsibly?
Yep.
That's the key.
Yep. And I think a great frame for that is who decides what live responsibility and how that's defined.
Exactly.
Because that matters as well.
Yes. Yes. And on that happy note.
Yes.
I wish you a great weekend. This is Thursday. Yeah, I have meetings tomorrow, weekend recovery again, and then more meetings next week, and we'll talk.
Absolutely.
I hope
Look forward to it.
Okay. You take care. Enjoy.
All right.